how are you this evening?
Oh, awesome.
I know, we're in this beautiful environment here in Tukwila, Washington.
Lovely nature.
Oh, awesome. Well, Mary, I was wondering if I could ask you a couple questions.
Oh, sure. Are you with the FBI?
No, I am not.
Okay.
But you never know. So I was wondering if you could tell me about your experiences with the FBI trap trial.
Oh, the FBI trap trial for kids?
Yeah.
Like breaking it down.
Breaking it down so my 5-year-old nephew could understand it.
So basically, back in the olden days,
Mm-hmm.
the good old days that are kind of like a utopic fantasy dream world that never happened,
Right.
we had a system that we called due process.
Due process. Could you explain what due process
Well, you
is?
want equality of application to the laws, because if the laws only apply to certain kinds of people, for instance, the aristocracy, then those laws are not going to be fairly administered to the large amount of people. So sort of like we want equal numbers of cookies for everyone.
Okay, here
and
we go.
Cookies are the metaphor for justice.
Right, so equal number of cookies for everyone, kids.
So with the
That makes
FBI
sense.
trap trial, it's like a which came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. Which came first, the trial or the trap?
Right, okay.
And in this instance, we had a prosecution agenda, which means that the prosecution sought to have the determination of a charge of guilt.
Yeah.
So it was the trap preceded the trial, but
Yeah.
very shortly thereafter, and it was a premeditated intent with the FBI trap trial too.
Okay, so when you say premeditated intent, what, and you're talking about the FBI?
It's the Federal Bureau of Investigations is almost 100 years old. They're basically a group of folks that roam through the streets, setting up little mousetrap, and they put a little bit of cheese.
Right. Okay.
Around the mousetrap, but they look for humans that like cheese and go in and eat the cheese, and then they trap them and they trial them, and then they go away for life.
Okay, so in this case, what was the person's name that they had?
Well, sadly and strangely enough, there have been about 175 trap trials in this context.
Oh, in this context.
But by trap trial, I guess I need a definition.
What date?
Well, post 9/11.
Post 9/11.
FBI had they were really embarrassed. They obviously had some intelligence failures, communication failures, their databases weren't syncing. They still have those kinds of troubles.
Right.
But they wanted to justify their $8.1 billion budget by getting the appearance of doing something. That's kind of like if you're doing your housework and your mom comes in and she's like, "Oh, honey, are you getting over there and over there?" They wanted to make a big, grand show. So the FBI trap trial is a sort of like just add water approach to making it look like you're doing something on your job. And you basically get what is called an agent provocateur to send really menacing emails to people. And then it's sort of like harvesting fish out of a stream. You send out your menacing violence, what I call violence coaching, which is encouraging people to commit violence in America.
So, let me ask you a question, Mary. Okay, so, I'm a person who's committed to nonviolence, right?
Oh, nonviolence.
Right. But I am very, very, very passionate about eradicating poverty, creating a truly egalitarian society, and speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
Now, how could you get someone like me
a job at the FBI?
Well, I was thinking, how could someone trap me, for instance? Someone like me.
Well, okay, if you look at an international picture, you could look at what was happening with environmental activists in England, where the environmental activists would get into a romantic relationship that would turn into cohabitation and children and a solid family life, and that person would be sending details on. Or say, for instance, Facebook is a place where criminal databasing occurs. So say, for instance, you're not a criminal now, but say if you went and did something criminal, then they've got all your information about where you've been, who you're hanging out with.
Right.
And it's just a perfect tool for law enforcement to find you.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're going to be an FBI trap trial victim, all of your email, your passwords, any emails you've sent, those kinds of things basically provide a large level of vulnerability for people with an FBI trap trial in their motivation to use something you did against you.
So I think it's important then maybe to say amongst activists, maybe creating more level of security culture.
Yeah, or also just one of the things I kind of go through with, a lot of people are very oriented towards privacy in that sense for their own security, but for me, I go for maximum transparency, where I'm very open in public with almost everything I'm thinking and doing. And when I write and blog about the FBI trap trial, it's because I have very serious concerns that I think a lot of people share my concerns. We're concerned about racial profiling, about targeting, about the surveillance culture, about the lack of due process, the lack of integration of technology in the courts. And all of these this lacking of modernization in our court system is something that is really our responsibility to address. And with the hyper transparency, I think a lot of the reasons why I'm really honest is I don't think of the FBI as like bad people that are out to get me. I think of all people, all human beings as redeemable. So I hope that they might listen to what I have to say, and that the young people watching FBI Trap Trial for Kids could realize that the FBI, while they sound federal and they sound investigative and like they might be like Inspector Gadget, that they might actually be setting a very carefully planned, premeditated trap for someone who's barely 18 or possibly has a history of depression or just different kinds of neurodiverse expression.
So what I'm hearing from you, Mary, is that the FBI has a policy of looking for people who are vulnerable, maybe less savvy or educated. Like, they wouldn't go after someone like you or me, or like in our 30s and have been doing this for a long time, but somebody who's just kind of like starting on their journey of consciousness and like the direction they want to go in their life.
Yeah, and that by definition, the FBI trap trial is not a fair process, and it's not an intercept of terrorism. It's not counterterrorism. It's an artificial stunt with a stooge who is set up sort of like, hold this hot potato now, let me take a picture, okay, now you're holding a hot potato. And the artificiality of it is very painful for people who actually care about national security, because it becomes a big sideshow and a distraction from involving ourselves in really helping communities that need to, that hopefully will want to embrace nonviolence like you're talking about.
Right. Well, and that's another thing, Mary. I was wondering if we can possibly do like a kind of side segue, talking about like nonviolence as a tactic. Is it a privilege? You know, I mean, Angela Davis talks a lot about this. Like she did an interview that you can see like on the Black Power mixtapes. You know, where she was trapped. Like FBI trapped her with a gun that was supposedly hers that someone used to shoot.
So they plant false weapons.
Right. So she was falsely accused. She was falsely accused. Almost was like they were going to give her the death penalty. Obviously, she's still alive and got out of it. But she was in the jail cell, and she did an interview with this Swedish film crew who did the Black Power mixtapes. Pretty amazing stuff. And she was talking about like how like society in general is inherently violent to her and to her people. And so when people talk about nonviolent action, that mostly they were bougie white liberals who didn't really understand that even the bougie white liberals were experiencing violence upon their bodies. So is nonviolence a privilege? Can you really go into like a completely disenfranchised and marginalized community and say, hey, nonviolence is a really great tactic?
Right, and that's where I've been thinking a lot about the FBI psychology and their background. And a lot of the secret agents who did the specific trap trial that I witnessed the court case for, they have very low verbal skills. They're obviously not of a higher academic echelon, and they have, even just like issues culturally that are reflective of impoverishment.
Right.
And what I realized is that FBI agents may have like 100% pure intentions, a good heart. They may have kids to support or something like that.
Right.
And I realized that how to get to them, these basic core principles of law, I think what we need is a medical integration where people in the medical industry oversee the FBI moments where, if somebody has a diagnosis or if somebody has a drug addiction problem, they're not going to be eligible for an FBI trap trial because that's obviously predicated on their vulnerability. And so when we combine an interdisciplinary approach, we can correct some of the deficits. And if an FBI agent himself or herself needs some kind of therapy or transition or rehab or maybe massage on the job or something like that, they are not going to need to like bully out all their aggression on this little Somali boy. They can have an alternative to express those frustration, because we all have sadness and despair over the wars and 9/11 and all of that. And I think they're taking out their 9/11 trauma on little targets.
Yeah, possibly, definitely. But don't you think that's actually FBI policy to target these folks?
Well, yeah, and that's where the policy leaders and shapers need help too. Like Dianne Feinstein was bragging about, oh, we have a 100% conviction rate, as if that's a good thing. A 100% conviction rate makes it look like you have an architecture of monkey courts that always give you the same outcome.
Right.
And that's a false sense of security. And God love her, but I love her, but I don't want her to be deluded into thinking that that's security. It's a false illusion of security.
Absolutely, Mary.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for explaining all of that.
Yeah, thank you. That was really fun.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay. Well.